Welcome to the session on energy management systems. Here we'll be taking a brief look at some of the requirements in ISO 50001, which currently is the most established standard in this field. Other standards do exist, and several countries have created national versions of this international standard, but as far as I've seen at least, the differences aren't huge. So let's focus on this one for the time being. Now, let's get started. ISO 50001 is built on the principle of continuous improvement, which is illustrated by the plan, do, check, act cycle here. As you may know from other areas, this cycle is generic to all sorts of topics where you want to achieve continuous improvement. So it needs to be interpreted for each area or topic, which is what 50001 does for energy management. First, the planning phase within energy management refers to creating an energy policy, conduct an energy review, establish energy performance indicators, setting targets, and developing action plans to achieve the objectives and targets that have been set. Then the do phase simply refers to carrying out the actions that have been planned. Subsequently, as part of the check phase, we should track the actions and make sure these are carried out according to plan, and also monitor how the energy performance indicators develop over time. Hopefully, as actions are implemented, you will start seeing results in these performance indicators. Checking may also include auditing company activities against the energy management system, simply to see whether the company is following the procedures that have been written to manage energy consumption. Based on what we find during these checks, we might have to identify further actions, which then are subject to planning, and we start a new cycle in the continuous improvement process. In the next few slides, we will take a closer look at the planning phase, as this is where you lay the foundation for all activities that come later on. The first part of planning is about deciding what we want to achieve, or in other words, creating an energy policy. So let's take a little peek at what other companies are doing in this respect. Coca-Cola and Procter & Gamble are fairly known brands to everyone, and both of these companies are quite serious about energy management, as you can see from these quotes. To start with, Coca-Cola say they focus on areas where they can make the most positive change. That means they will have to identify where they consume most of their energy and look to these areas to find efficiency improvements. As we will see later, this is exactly what you do in an energy review. So what Coca-Cola mentioned in their policy statement is nothing more and nothing less than what applicable standards, such as ISO 50001, require. Next, we have Procter & Gamble. They don't explicitly mention energy efficiency in their vision statement, but they do want to go renewable. However, in the detailed goals they have set for themselves to implement their vision, they aim to reduce power consumption by 20%, as well as reduce the amount of transportation on trucks by another 20%. Once you have decided in what direction you want to go, the most important part of the planning phase is to get an understanding of your current situation in terms of energy use, which is what you do through the energy review. An important input to this is historical data on energy use. Then, either through interviews or regression analysis, you will need to understand what variables that have a significant impact on your energy use. Is your energy use, for example, mostly tied to the outdoor temperature, the time of day, or the volumes of production, or something else? The better you understand your energy consumption, the better your chances are for finding improvements. The actual review, as we have seen before, is about focusing on the areas where the largest improvements can be achieved. And this is typically done in the areas or activities that consume most energy. So these first need to be identified, and then we can start thinking about how we can achieve improvements in these areas. As a result from the energy review, we will get an energy baseline. we can establish suitable energy performance indicators against which we can monitor future energy performance and set targets and action plans. Again, the most important part of the continuous improvement cycle is the planning phase. And the most important part of the planning phase is the energy review. So that is what the remainder of this course will focus on, the energy review. Once the energy review has been carried out, we will know what areas within the business that are the biggest energy consumers, and these should receive corresponding high focus in terms of operational routines, monitor of performance indicators, and efforts to identify improvements. So in daily operation, these are the areas to be monitored more closely in terms of energy use. Next, we know that we can only achieve so much with existing equipment and processes, while we have a larger impact on future energy use if energy consumption is taken into account in the design and procurement phases of a business. By taking a life cycle perspective on investments, we will be able to select solutions that are optimal in terms of cost and energy efficiency in the long run. Unfortunately, I've seen so many cases where large investments are made with a very short-sighted view of the costs. To make sure project budgets are met, long-term costs are sometimes ignored or at least receive less focus. And these are in many cases much larger than the initial investment cost. To achieve a long-term cost and energy savings, the ISO standard therefore requires such considerations to be taken in the procurement processes. Finally, the last box in this slide tells us that once routines and practices have been established to control energy use, audits should take place to verify that the routines are known and applied in daily operation. Likewise, the established energy performance indicators are to be mentioned and monitored on a regular basis to ensure that focus remains and that efforts are made to improve these. Which brings us to the next slide, which is about energy performance indicators. Let's take a brief look at these. We could probably spend a few hours talking about performance indicators, but let's just say they should be developed and used with care to achieve the kind of focus and improvements that we want to achieve. We need performance indicators to monitor and manage performance. There's an old management saying that if you measure something, then it changes, meaning that if management focuses on energy use, this will increase awareness in the organization and hopefully lead to more thoughtful use of energy with resulting reduction in consumption. Monitoring should be done on a regular basis, and the indicators need to be easy to understand. So the simpler we can keep them, the better. But of course, there's a balance here. Let's take a look at what is probably the most common performance indicator, energy consumption per unit produced, which is what the graph indicates here. If we use this very simple indicator, our baseline measure will follow the blue line in the graph as production volume increases. But it's not difficult to think of business activities where parts of the energy use is independent of production volume. For example, you will probably need heating, lighting, ventilation of your buildings, regardless of how much is produced. So the actual energy use may be closer to the red line, where we have a base load independent of produced volume, and then it increases depending on the volume. This means that the simple indicator with the blue line of energy use per produced unit will overestimate the energy use if your produced volume is high, and vice versa. If this is not taken into account, and we use this indicator blindly, the indicator will be of limited use in practice. This is just one example of the challenge with indicators. So we need to think hard about how we intend to use the indicators and be a bit careful when designing and using them. And this is particularly true if we're considering to tie any type of reward system or bonus system to these indicators. And that wraps up the session on energy management system. Next, we'll start looking at the energy review.